Hi, this is Tjoni and welcome to Spiral Out Loud, where we explore different ways where we can help to create a thriving future for all sentient beings. Now, I'm super excited today to be joined by Bonny Hut. She's an incredible artist and filmmaker and truth seeker who has been exploring all sorts of different things for a very, very long time. And I was watching one of her movies recently that prompted me to get in touch and say, hey, can we have a chat? So, welcome, Bonny.
Hi, thanks. Thanks for having me here.
My pleasure. How are you today?
Yeah, excellent.
Fabulous. All right, so we've got a pretty juicy topic to talk about today. We're having a chat about time. And this is something that I've been, I guess, exploring in many ways since I was a little girl. And I guess just looking at the different realities, potential stories around time. So, just a quick little background story. I had the experience when I was about 7 years old of suddenly being unstuck in time, and I didn't have any way to um, express it. And I didn't know anybody that had had that similar kind of experience until I actually read Slaughterhouse 5 by Kurt Vonnegut when I was in my teens. And it was the first person that had actually expressed this idea of falling out of time and being able to shift through timelines. Bonnie, I wonder if you've got what's your experience of time in your own world?
Oh, look, uh, it's one of those things which I have been researching for years, for starters. And of course, with things like the Mandela Effect, there's been so much on the Mandela Effect. If any of you guys want to go and look it up if you don't know about it, which is, of course, the shifting of the timelines, where, of course, hundreds of thousands of people remember things as happening as one way, and then hundreds of thousands of people are absolutely convinced that all of these things, such as movie scripts, things happening in history, they are completely convinced it happened in another way. It's so tangible that I mean, in 2015, I couldn't take it anymore. It just did my head in so much. I had to go to Bali for a few weeks, uh, and not look at it. Uh, yeah. There's very strange things happening at the moment with the timelines, in more ways than one.
Um, and so then there's been other people with different ideas and viewpoints, such as Chris Griscolm, who was Shirley MacLaine's spiritual acupuncturist back in the day. And she wrote a great book called Time is an Illusion, where she spent a lot of time in New Mexico with her daughter. And they say that the the space or the veil between worlds and the veil between time is very thin there. So, for instance, there's a lot of ET sightings. There's people that say they've seen dragons, maybe dragons, dinosaurs. They have, school children running around with the local natives from, hundreds of years ago. So they say that that's one of the few places in the world where you can your perception can become a little bit unstuck in that way, I guess, and you can perceive more than this timeline that we're kind of stuck on. And another person that had some interesting ideas was Carlos Castaneda's, and he was talking about a point of perception on the body and almost like tuning into a different radio station by moving that point of perception, which was often done by force by a shaman, but which could also happen through trauma, then your perception would immediately tune into a completely different reality. And so I guess that was the first time for me that I got a sense that our timelines can almost be split. And also that with trauma, I don't know if you've experienced this, Bonnie, but sometimes when I've had a trauma that's something that's almost an accident, where something dreadful almost happened, but you just caught yourself at the last minute. Sometimes I just get this rush of adrenaline, and it's almost like I can feel another me who's actually fallen into that other alternate reality. And I've heard countless shamans talking about that as well, of healing potential traumas and severe injuries by using the imagination to imagine a different scenario, and that if you do that, then the injury that could have manifest actually becomes greatly minimized. So I feel like there's a huge amount of conversation and possibility
Well,
around, yeah.
that's the basis of PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, because when you are in a traumatic situation, your body leaves your soul leaves your body, and you are essentially stuck in that timeline. And that's why people with PTSD keep reliving um, that situation, because part of their soul is still in that timeline. And that's also why the doctors, the medical profession, say that PTSD is untreatable, because they can't treat it, because what you need is soul retrieval. So shamans and other people who work in those areas have been able to cure people from PTSD because they were able to retrieve their souls from that area of time and space.
And I imagine that things like people that have lost limbs having phantom limbs could be a similar thing as well. That they're,
Look, that's possible, but I mean, because that limb would probably still exist in the etheric, in the soul, in the body's etheric blueprint. And it also depends on the brain as well. The brain might think that limb still exists, even though it might not. But I suppose that's similar but different. Yeah.
yeah, absolutely. And one thing that we chatted about at length recently is this idea of time actually splitting. And like I've heard Bashar talking about that idea that our timelines split. I've heard other people, in like even astrologers and so on, talking about that split. And what's your experience or knowledge about the idea that our timelines are actually splitting?
Well, throughout my many, many years of research, one of the aspects that remained constant amongst whistleblowers, spiritual healers, religions, was this idea of the timeline splitting. Um, and also, on a more scientific level, if you look at the CIA's Project Looking Glass, which is their where they had remote viewing. They had devices that helped trained remote viewers to perceive the future and the past. Before 2012, there were multiple timelines and multiple possibilities, according to this project Looking Glass. But then, of course, after 2012, there seemed to be two distinctive timelines that couldn't be altered. And as much as the powers that be, or that were, the cabal, have been trying to alter these timelines using quantum computers, using things like CERN, uh, the Hadron Collider, where they pretend they're looking for the God particle, but they're doing other things. They just have been unable to shift this idea about these two timelines. The one timeline is positive and the other timeline is negative. And a lot of the cabal know that they're going into the negative timeline because that matches their frequency, and they are trying to drag as many people down with them as they possibly can, from my perception.
And you mentioned the God particle. I don't know a lot about that, but I have heard the terminology before. Would you like to elaborate on that at all?
Look, the cabal have these multi-billion-dollar machines, and they tell the public that they're doing things like looking for the God particle, which is complete BS. They're actually using these machines to try and open portholes, collapse timelines, according to a lot of whistleblowers, but they seem to have been sabotaged time and time again. They even tried a huge thing with it at 2012 when the timelines apparently started splitting. So as I say, we're just here to give out ideas to people today, and people need to go and look it up. Look up CERN, CERN.
CERN, CERN. I will put that up on the screen. And another thing that you mentioned is the rapture. Now, I've never read the Bible, so I got no concept of it. Would you like to just explain what that is and how it could possibly relate to this situation that's potentially happening right now?
So as I mentioned, various whistleblowers, religions, other spiritual teachings all talk about, in their own way, the splitting of the timelines. So the rapture is spoken about in the book of Revelations, where apparently Christ will be returning, and the timelines will basically split, but they don't talk about it in those terms. They're saying the so-called negative people will remain on one area of reality, and the positive people will go up, and sister will part from sister, mother will part from father, or whatever, if they are on different frequencies. And then, of course, the returning of Christ they have their perception of it in the Bible, but a lot of people also believe that Christ is also a kind of a consciousness, a frequency. When they say you can go through the Father only through me, it actually means that on some level, that type of consciousness, you can only get to the great creator through that type of frequency or consciousness or awareness. And some people have said that, Christ or whatever has returned, even in some of these children that are being born now in their thousands that have this type of consciousness. It's not just one being coming back to earth. It's actually this consciousness returning to earth in these multiple children, which, in my perception, that's one of the reasons they want to try and vaccinate them. Whether you think that's another topic, but it shuts off their third eye and shuts them down. That's just my perception, and a lot of other people's perception.
I was going to say, I think that's shared by many. And another topic related to that is when, if you just Google the splitting of time, one thing that comes up quite often is the idea of moving from a 3D to a 5D world, as in the 3D world being, I guess, what you call being our patriarchal current structure, which we're moving out of, that is about separation and isolation and ego and control and greed and fear and lack and all of those things, and moving towards 5G, which is more about being integrated and whole within ourselves and connected. Have you looked into that particular idea, and do you have any elaboration on that?
Look, there's that's just a different way of saying, a different way of perceiving what's happening. Of course, there's many different schools of thought about that. And also, if you look at Dolores Cannon, who did multiple thousands of hypnosises on on people across her life, and she's written many books. She used a very, very specific type of hypnosis where she accessed parts of people that you couldn't access through normal hypnosis. You know, she also managed to talk to like ETs and you know, people in their past lives, and through her hypnosis, some interesting information has come through about this timeline, you know, 3D to 5D idea, because I mean 3D to 5D, you know, again, that's just a shift in frequency. So according to Dolores Cannon, you know, it's one of the greatest things that has happened. It's never happened on another planet before, and the whole universe is currently watching this experiment. You know, it's going to be amazing. And also, if you look at people who read the Akashic records, like for example Chris Thomas, he seems to think that it's not actually a 3D to 5D split. He seems to think that our souls, which have mostly been outside of our bodies, are actually going to come home. We're not going anywhere. We're not going 3D to 5D. We are actually coming home. Our souls are going to be able to, our bodies are going to be able to house far more parts of our souls, which means we will again have access to far greater abilities than what we had before, you know, like the junk DNA, unactivated junk DNA. So look, it's just different languages to just describe, in essence, the same thing. So yeah, that's my perception of it.
And even that going towards something, it's a very human construct of generating that idea of linear time, and that you're going to somewhere or striving for something rather than inviting it in. And I like Abraham Hicks' notion that our process of supposedly going through time is actually being still, but we're just going deeper and deeper to the center, just like a 1,000 petal lotus opening. So it kind of has that fractal sense of just getting deeper and deeper into the core. And so that feels energetically similar to what you're talking about. Yeah, we don't need to go anywhere. And the other day, also you mentioned something about the timelines potentially being merged. Would you like to go into that?
Oh, look, that was just what the Cabal were trying to do with this CERN. You know, they don't want to be stuck in the dodgy timeline. You know what I mean? They don't want to be paying the consequences of everything, all the havoc that they've been reaping on the planet, you know, for centuries. So they want everybody in the same camp. You know, they don't want other people going off and being free. So yeah, it's not working.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. And from my perspective, you know, there's so many ways that this sense of sovereignty on every level, including our spiritual level, is being controlled and manipulated through the physicality. And, you know, for so many years, I've just been looking at the state of, you know, food, entertainment, our medical world, electrical fields, education, money, toxicity. None of it makes sense unless there's some element of trying to gain control and basically stupefy and enslave us on some level. Have you got anything to add to that, of in what ways they are possibly manipulating and controlling us?
yeah, well, I mean, everything's frequency. A timeline is, of course, also a frequency. And of course, they putting toxins into our food, as we know, and also with the electromagnetic interference. And, I mean, some people in the spiritual world believe, or they keep saying this thing, we are the soul, we are not the body, we are the soul, we are not the body. I don't quite agree with that. I believe the body has an energetic blueprint. The body is actually part of the soul, and this energetic blueprint we take with us when we leave this life. So how you treat your body affects your soul. I mean, that's one of the areas, I mean, I don't quite agree with Abraham Hicks on, as an example, is I've also studied death for many, many years. What I've seen is that not everybody always just goes into this love and light bubble, regardless of anything, when they leave. There's a lot of possibilities on the other side, as there are here. And people also reincarnate with symptoms of illnesses and things that they've had in previous lives as well, because you take that energetic blueprint of your body with you when you go. It's a holistic thing. Of course, food is frequency, and of course, toxic food is in resonance with toxic entities and toxic thought forms. So it's much harder to have positive thoughts and be free of negative entities or even negative people if you are consuming food that is in resonance with the negativity. So it is food, for example, is a tangible way or slightly more tangible way of clearing out.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know from experience, back in the day when I could actually eat junk food, I'd only need to have junk food 2 or 3 days in a row, and I would be almost suicidal. Like my system could not handle it. So I can't imagine how it is for people that are just living on crap at the moment. It seems like torture. But that idea that we take our body with us, I guess, or the blueprint of it, I should say, I guess that rang true for me a few years ago. There was a period of about 6 or 8 months where my ancestors were very, very strong around my system, to the point where a friend said, "Can you just get those guys to buzz off because they're making so much noise?" Someone that I was working with. And that was the first time I got the sense that just because someone leaves their body doesn't mean they're all of a sudden some enlightened soul, for want of a better word, and that there are plenty of entities that have left their body that still want us to do their biting for them. So it's really good to know who's on the right side of things.
Yeah, because I've also heard a number of times from various psychics that when they walk into the pub, there's often a lot of dead alcoholics hanging around there, because the alcoholics are still alcoholics and they like that frequency. They're in resonance with that frequency. There's just so many different stories that contradict this idea that we immediately go into this, love and light when we pass over and all our issues are forgotten. No, we take our issues with us, unfortunately. So we have to deal with them.
Yeah, I was thinking it's a nice idea that we can just wipe our slate clean when we pass over. Wouldn't that be fun?
Doesn't seem to work that way.
Unfortunately not.
And also, look, and all these studies people have done on children that have remembered their past lives, a lot of the time they actually physically look like they did in past lives, or not always, but they often, bear resemblance to what they even look like. So.
And I've heard of birthmarks being the sites of significant trauma in past lives as well. I don't have anything to back that up, but it is an interesting idea.
Yeah, well, a lot of healers, often heal issues, physical issues that people might have had in a past life that are affecting, you know, people today in order to heal it. So
then looking forward to how this could all possibly manifest, as in the splitting of the timelines and so on, in a positive way. And one version that I heard that I quite enjoyed was from an astrological reading by a woman called Lada. And I actually shared it on the last In Spiral newsletter. I will also put a link below this video. And she was talking about the idea that, as well as a timeline split, that even within the one reality or the one timeline, that there would be a split, and that, you know, there's so much polarization, it seems, at the moment between vax and anti-vax, 5G and what are you talking about, conspiracy versus mainstream MSM news. That there just seems to be so much polarity, and everyone fighting for everybody else to have the same idea to be in their world. But what she was saying, which I quite liked, is that, you know, there's going to be some people that for them to be in a system where you're vaccinated and have welfare and have all your technology and have all of your different services and have your protection, that actually does suit a lot of people. Not everybody wants to be free. And she said there will become a time not too far into the future where literally those people will be in the big cities, but there will be almost a 50-50 split also of those who are reclaiming their sovereignty and who don't subscribe to the whole idea of vaccinations and 5G and would much prefer a simpler life, living in connection to the spirit, in connection to the land, in connection to each other, and connection to self. And I like the fact that there was no judgment in that. It's just, we just as individual souls having our individual life journeys through humanity, we just have different aspects that we wish to experience. Do you have any ideas, Bonnie, on how, other ideas on how that will manifest, that potential splitting of the time?
well, according to people like Dolores Cannon's, you know, and Bashar's mentioned some of this, you know, the polarization between the positive and negative aspects obviously are going to be amplified more and more and more. And at first you can go back and forth between the timelines, but eventually it's going to get to a point where you can't go back and forth, you know, and at them, and you've got to make sure which train you're on. You know, it's easier to start with the train, which train you're on earlier on, okay, because later on it's going to be more difficult to jump. It's going to be quite subtle, and eventually people who are not in resonance with you will simply start to disappear.
Yeah.
You know, you simply won't be able to phone that person, or you simply won't be able to access that person, or you know, those people just won't be in your resonance anymore. It's quite strange. I mean, nobody knows exactly how this is going to play out. However, as far as the predominant human type of typical soul is concerned, you know, a lot of them, of course, listen to authority and have their paradigm, because they have had multiple lifetimes on this planet where they've been conditioned over and over again and programmed over and over again to listen to authority, to listen to what's being said, to rather choose safety over freedom, etc., etc. And it is the job of those guys who have volunteered to come here, who have not had multiple lifetimes on Earth, to at least present to those people seeds of other possibilities. You know, so it's not just, oh, let them do their thing. Okay, let them, if they want to go off into that dodgy timeline, just let them do it. Okay, people have come here to at least give them options and say, hey, there is another way. You know, we people who are souls from elsewhere that have come at this area of space and time. You know, even with they might get huge amounts of backlash for offering, saying, hey, look at this, hey, look at that, hey, you know what I mean? We've come here to do a job, you know, not just, oh, let them go to their dodgy timeline, no judgment, let them do their thing. You know what I mean? And the job involves confrontation, unpleasantness, because we're going against the grain. We're going against the, it'd be so much easier if we could just go along and just chill and have our ice cream, you know.
We wouldn't be here if that
Be
were the
lovely.
case.
It'd be lovely if we didn't have to face this confrontation, but we've come here to do a job, to offer these, to show these people, hey, you can go in your timeline, you can go to the dodgy timeline if you like, but there is also another possibility, if that makes any sense at all. So,
Yeah.
what I'm saying is I kind of only half agree with what that other lady was saying.
Yeah, absolutely. I hear that too. And a story came to me a little while ago about just in relation to at what point can you offer a possibility and offer a message and have it received. And the analogy was of a chick being in an egg. And if the egg shell starts to crack, then the chick's world is mostly of the inside of its egg, which it knows. But if its shell has started to crack and it starts to see lines and something beyond, it will most likely want some sense of assistance, some calling, some sense of mapping or pathway to get through to that. And so I feel like at the moment am meeting a lot of people who their eggshells have started to crack, and they are asking the questions and are actually seeking some supportive, open-minded guidance in that regard. And that's part of the reason for doing this podcast series. But there's also people whose shells, it doesn't matter how big and squished and molded and cramped they get in their shells, if they're not cracked, some of them just don't want to know that there's anything on the other side. And I was kind of told quite strongly, if nothing's cracking and if no one's knocking, they're just not going to shift at all. It's the ones who are trying to make the shift but that need some assistance, that people like us who are expanding our awareness as much as possible. We can still only function through our own filters, but we, do at least do our best to try and find other options and possibilities. And I guess to be able to act as some kind of beacon for those that are looking for something else. So I agree. I agree with both of you.
Look, I totally agree. And I mean, a lot of these people are not stupid. They hypnotized, because they are very, very, very sophisticated, so sophisticated people wouldn't believe it. Agendas that use social engineering and mind control. Okay, like the Tavistock Institute facilitates the mind control from the planet, and they have been using very sophisticated techniques of mind control for years. Okay, and things like, even for example, the Montauk project, which was a CIA operation where they used thousands of children in order to facilitate their mind control projects. Yeah, so sometimes what can you do? At the end of the day, it is a choice, as you say. We can just do what we can.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
And if
And
people can just, if people can just stop watching the television, they might find themselves less hypnotized.
absolutely. They don't call them programs for nothing. So, and that brings us to the next question of, well, what can we do? And I guess from my perspective, it is about tuning out of all of those things that bring our energy down, such as television, like you just said, and in fact, any of the mainstream media that is just propagating the same circus of fear and control and manipulation, and just noise in general. Like, I feel like our senses have been so dumbed down by constantly being bombarded on every level with just this onslaught of information. And it makes a lot of people actually quite afraid to just sit and be still. And meditation for a lot of people can be a terrifying experience because that silence can just be so deafening. But I feel like the best thing that we can do right now is just to detox, detox, detox. That's the big words that keep coming up on my screen because that's what I typed. Just detoxing on every level and trying to find some stillness. Bonnie, what are some ideas that you might have for, for what people on a physical, practical level can actually do at this time?
Well, for starters, human beings have access to higher realms and higher frequencies and higher ways of perception than the cabal do. Okay, and that's one of the things the cabal or the deep state or whoever you want to call them are very, very afraid of. Okay, and these, the fact that we can access these higher realms can essentially override this paradigm on many levels. Okay, because it's a stronger frequency. And sometimes we can't always beat them with technology. We can't always beat them on the ground. But we can access, as I say, higher realms, which can also help us with guidance, help us with what to do, help us with a myriad of different things. And in that way, we are stronger. So it is very important, I think, for humans to start to, do what you can, pray, see beauty everywhere, beauty in the plants, because beauty is access to these higher realms as well, and override the system in that way.
Absolutely. And on top of that, I guess I would like to add that it's a fine balance between knowing what's going on, knowing what needs to be undone so that we can know which bits we want to move towards. But at the same time, there is so much monstrosity, and there's a lot of news coming out right now that, is quite devastating. But to be able to look at that as a symptom almost of the shadows of our consciousness that are moving through to be healed, and to be able to look at all of the noise without being fearful of it, because fear is just going to be driving those entities as well, fear and sadness. And I mean, anger is pretty good because we can use that to activate ourselves, but fear to me is just something that we need to avoid at all costs. So if you're feeling fearful, work on it.
And also, when shadow things are coming up, darker things are coming up, sometimes they're coming up because they need to be faced and they need to be addressed. And once you've processed it, then you can let it go. It's not always just a case that some of the new age people say of only just looking at the positive. Sometimes, things are polarizing, so our shadows are getting more intense, so we can process it.
Yeah, agreed. And I feel, that especially the last few months, I just feel like the death throes of the deep state are just lashing out in so many ways. And, I really feel that it is crumbling and that we are just seeing that lashing out from that respect. But yeah, just considering that, well, yeah, it's a system that's on its way out, and they're going to be reacting quite violently potentially. So
Exactly, they're cornered rats,
yeah,
or whatever you might say, and they are absolutely, they're going down. They know it. There's nothing they can do about it. So the only thing they can do is try and drag as many people down with them as they possibly can.
so don't let it be you. Speaking of, what could we dream? What can we dream to generate the beautiful possibilities that really are quite potent at the moment? Do you have any thoughts on that?
Oh, look, I suppose in a way we're lucky to have been given this so-called rest time, a contemplation time, stillness time, where we're forced to be home and out of the rat race, and we can reassess what our priorities actually are. We can reassess what we actually want to do with our lives. We can reassess where we actually want to go. So it's almost been like a double-edged sword, or where everything's been turned upside down. And we can decide now that where we want to go and what we want to create.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel that this is such a perfect time for that. And as I mentioned to you when we were chatting earlier, I just feel like for the last few years, there's been a sense of buoyancy, and it's kind of like that weightless, unformed moment when you're on a trampoline or on a bungee jump and all of the cells just start to relax. I kind of feel like we're at that situation right now where all the cards are in the air. No one knows what's going on. Well, nobody, I don't think, has the entire picture anyway. But it's really up to us now to direct how those cards are going to fall. And, I love the analogy of, well, which wolf are you going to feed? Are you going to feed into the fear mongering wolf, or are you going to feed into the sovereign, joyful one and hang out with a really cool pack? So, yeah, so it definitely feels like a time to be tuning out what potentially is and tune in to all of the bits that we do love about the planet and all the creatures on it and beyond, and really focus on what it is that we're looking to bring in for all sentient beings, basically. So, is there anything else that you'd like to add, Bonnie, before we finish up today?
Um, Look, I mean, we are living in one of the strangest times in human history. It is a different scenario, than it was, for example, in the First and Second World War. That kind of shadow. This time round, all of these very, very interesting and advanced beings have incarnated into this area of time and space, for various reasons, to try and help out. Um, there is a lot of help. Um, and yeah, just keep it simple. Don't make it too complicated.
Absolutely.
And yeah, that's about it. It's just about frequency at the end of the day.
Indeed. And I was actually just reminded of a beautiful notion that Joe Montano from Collective Evolution spoke about. And he said, just remember that before we came here into these bodies now, right now, we were super freaking excited to be coming here. And he just talked about what a joyful expectation and what a privilege it is to be here in such a momentous period of time. It's just wild. And yeah, there might be a whole lot that's scary, and I'm sure that there are people that are really struggling, and that's not such a great thing at all. But the big picture, I think we're really moving into something that eventually will be wonderful once the dust settles. So, yay.
Absolutely, absolutely.
So, Bonnie, thanks so much for being here today. It's been so lovely to chat to you.
Yes, thank you so much, Tjoni.
My pleasure.
That's been
So,
awesome.
and if people would like to explore your amazing creative world and all of your artwork, Bonnie's an amazing painter. Please go and check out her work. Where can people find you?
You can go to bonnyhut.net. So BONNYHUT.net. Yeah.
Lovely. All right. Well, thank you so much for that, and have a beautiful day.
You
And
too.
thank you. And for all of you at home, if you would like to subscribe to more In Spiral Out Loud podcasts, please do email me at info@in-spiral.org. And until next time, my friends, please be well and keep dreaming the good dream. Ciao for now.
Bye.